So I am JAISHR, assistant professor in AKGEC Engineering College, Ghaziabad, in CSE department. So today we will understand about the resource provisioning and resource provisioning methods in the cloud computing. This is a topic in Unit 4. So this topic is tell about how can we provision the resources into different manner, and the provider, how can provider use the different method to provision the resources and allocate those resources to the virtual machine. So while any provider is going to provide the going to build the cloud infrastructure, so there is a requirement that enough resource should be added to the resource pool, so that when customer is going to demand those resources can be easily allocated. So in this lecture we will understand about the different provisioning methods. So firstly we have to understand what are the different resources, how can those resources can be allocated to the cloud. So we all know that we have some kind of infrastructure. When we are going to develop or build the cloud infrastructure, then we have required certain virtual machines, so that we can first step is we all know that we have to develop the infrastructure. So for this the basic use is that the application and services provided in a cloud are the based on the virtual resources. So we all know that before providing the cloud services, we require the resources, and those resources are called as virtual resources. These virtual resources are abstracted from the physical resource. So as we have a desktop system in physical mode, so we have the hard disk, we have the processor, and all the kind of hardware is associated with our machine, and then we install the window, and we try to install different app on that window to work on that system. So if we are going to take the service from the cloud, then these all resources, these all hardwares and application are have to be deployed on the cloud. So while deployment phase, all kind of hardware should be installed on the virtual stations, on the cloud stations. So we have different kind of virtual resources. As we have the physical resource in our machine, in same kind we have to deploy the virtual resources over the cloud. So we can say we have virtual CPUs, we have virtual storage, we have virtual network. So we have to convert, we have to deploy these kind of virtual resources on the cloud. So we can say there is a virtual network that can be further divided into virtual routers and virtual switches. So we have already understand the OSI model. So before understanding this subject, actually we need to know about the cloud computer networks basic. So firstly, while building the infrastructure, we require to build the first layer is physical layer, then data link layer, and then network layer. So when we connect all the component on the station and on the provider end, so we have to develop the we have to connect all those kind of system, and we have to connect our system to the network. So while connection, we required routers also, we required switches also, so that we can connect different virtual machines on the same server. So all these kind of resources are required. Virtual firewalls, VPN, virtual private networks, and virtual interfaces, virtual links based on the physical router. So firstly, the cloud provider need to deploy these all kind of services, and then we talk about the resource provisioning methods. So we can say these computational resources are managed in terms of the virtual machines. So actually our desktop is now converted into the virtual machine form, and we can take the service of the virtual machine, that is called as infrastructure as a service. And so there is a at the provider end, provider will deploy the virtual clusters. Actually there are not a single virtual machine, the provider will deploy the multiple layers of the virtual machine. So these all virtual machines are get clubbed and form a virtual cluster. So group of VM instances providing the same services. So it is the duty or at the provider and the cluster, all the virtual machines get employed with the resources. So we can say there are, if in a cluster there are 3 virtual machines, so we can say this is a one cluster, this is a one virtual machine, this is second, and this is third component. So all we have to provide this virtual machine, we have to provide the virtual CPU and virtual storage and connect this virtual machine to the virtual server for getting to connected with the network. So these all cluster will be deployed with the resources, and we have some kind of operating system deployed on that machine. So we can say if it is equipped with Windows 11 or Windows 10 or Windows 7, so we can deploy different operating system on the virtual machines, and this is, we can say, the cluster group. So we have different, we can say these are the different guest operating system, VM1, VM2, VM3, and all are equipped with the hardware. So this hardware is around the connected to that virtual machine, and we can deploy different operating system on these machines. So this is one infrastructure, how resources are connected in the, or how resource can be divided onto the different virtual machines. So now we come to the point, what is resource provisioning. Resource provisioning means to prepare the virtual machines with appropriate resources. So I already discussed, when a provider is going to provide the service, then they have to be deployed the different virtual machines on their networks, and then provide the resources to that virtual machine and make them ready for the user application. So this is kind of infrastructure the cloud provider are going to deploy before providing the services to their customers. And the question arises how to allocate these resources to the VM to match the workload. So there are many kind of resources, like we have different processors, we have different RAM. So how can we equip the virtual machine with different resources? How much resource should be allocated to one VM? So this is very decided by the provider, how much RAM, how much processor is going to be attached with that virtual machine. So to prepare a virtual cluster with appropriate instances, instances mean if we have 2 RAM, so RAM have 2 instances. If we have 3 processors, so 3 instances of CPU will be there. So instances will be the quantity or number of count of the resources, and make it ready for the virtual cluster for computation. So it depends how much resources we are going to equip with that virtual machine, so that the customer purpose will be solved. If customer want to deploy high storage applications, so we need to provide the higher storage to that virtual machine. So to manage the changes in the resource availability through the virtual machine restore or migration. So if we if provider feel that resources are going to be waste and there is no more uses of the resources, then resources can be migrated from one VM to other VM. So this is all kind how can infrastructure will be prepared and resources will be equipped to that virtual machine. So basically goal is what? High resource utilization is the first goal of the provider. Then energy efficiency, so that when consumption will be more, then energy can be saved. So this is second goal. And reliability of the services, when customer have taken the service, then there should be no compromise of the service. So reliability is very important. And low performance interference means there should be no error, or the connection should be proper, and the server should be available always. So these are all the goals while providing the resources to the virtual machine. Provider have to ensure this kind of applications. So the scenario is what? Actually we have different kind of virtual clusters. So we have resource provider one, which have equipped with 4 virtual machines, and these are the servers, data centers to which these virtual machines are connected and their data is going to be stored in that data centers, and this is resource provider 2 and this is resource provider 3 and 4. So we have different kind of provider like Amazon, IBM, Microsoft. So different providers can be there, and in between we have, these are all the clients which are going to take the services to these providers, and in between actually we are going to club the provider services so that there is no scarcity of the resources, and the client will get the resource at any manner. So we have tie up with the brokers, and these broker have connected with the different providers. So as per the client demand, broker will select the resource provider. So which services are empty, which resources are empty, that resource will be provided to that client. So it will be easy to manage, and resource utilization will also increase. So this kind of scenario will increase the resource utilization, and the customer satisfaction will also increase. It will be benefited for both customer as well as provider end, and broker will also be get benefit. So all will be connected like this manner. So now resource, what is the terms which are involved in this? So different terms are, resource providers are there. Resource provider are what? Business companies can be the provider, cluster managers, and even hosts which provide the physical resources. So actually when we deploy the resources, then we required certain physical component also. So like we assemble our system, we take the hard disk from other companies, and we assemble all the components from different companies. So these are different hosts that can also have the kind of resource providers, such as infrastructure as a service. This is one kind of service, and that depend which provider are going to provide this kind of services. And we have clients which are going to take the interest to take the service from the cloud. So users or applications can be the clients, and they do not have the knowledge regarding control over the underlying data center. Actually all management and the access right will be divided. So the client have to access the resource, so it will be divided by the decided by the provider how much access to will be provided to the client, and client what resources client can access, what cannot access. So it will be decided by the provider. So all control will be in the hand of provider. Customer only going to use the resource, and these resources actually managed by the provider. And third one is broker. Broker will what? Which is a intermediator between the provider and the client, and its duty is what? Allocate the resources to the applications or services so that it will fulfill the request of the different clients. So this is the purpose of this, and manage the resources provided by the several resource providers. So it is connected, broker will be actually connected to the different providers. So its duty is what? To manage the resources of that is hired by the customer, and so it tie up with the provider and try to resolve the errors. And resource allocation in order to obtain the most cost effective resources. So third role of broker is what? To allocate the resources to the different clients or different applications. Next, now there are three resource provisioning methods. This is very much important. So how can we divide the resources on the virtual machine? So there are different parameters. Like we can say, first parameter is what? Demand driven resource provisioning. Second is event driven resource provisioning, and third is popularity driven resource provisioning method. So demand driven, as the name suggests, so as per the demand, when we feel like there is a high demand of the resources, then we will try to provide more resources to that virtual machine. And the second one is event driven. Event driven method is based on the predicted workload. Means when we know there is a festival time or there is a like Christmas event is going to be there. So we can we can predict the event load. According to that load, we are going to provide the resource to that virtual machine. And popularity driven means there is a requirement can be changed according to the need of the market. So some application are highly demanded, so this depend on the demand or popularity. So which is most important, if the popularity get increase, then we have to deploy that application on that virtual machine. That is very important. So on the basis of the popularity, the resources are going to be provisioned. So these are actually three methods. So we can understand it in detail. So what is demand driven resource provisioning? Actually, this method is going to add or remove the instances based on the current utilization level. So it is not only adding the resource, we can also delete or we can also remove the resources from that virtual machine. So it depends how much computation, how much use is there. So in general, when resource has surpassed a threshold, so we have decided a term, that is when we have taken the threshold, and according to the threshold amount, we compare if the resource utilization is below threshold, then we will increase the resources, and if it is greater than threshold, then we will try to remove the resource. So it will depend ki how much threshold is there. Next, when a resource is below a threshold for a certain amount of time, then resource should be decreased accordingly. So like Amazon implement as auto scaling feature. So Amazon have already make it the automatic system. So automatically resources will get increase or decrease as per the threshold. So this scheme doesn't work outright if the workload changes abruptly. So if there are abrupt changes in the workload, then the auto scaling feature will not work. So next is event driven resource provisioning. What is this? This scheme add or remove the machine instances based on the specific time event. So what are the specific time? We can say this scheme is work better for seasonal or predicted event such as Christmas time in the west and Lunar New Year in the east. Okay, so it depend on the area and in that area what is event is going to be organized. So we will predict the event time, and according to these events, we will going to increase the number of user will grow before the event period and decrease during the event period. So when user got increase and they are going to take the service from the cloud provider, then we have to raise the resources. So this scheme anticipate the peak traffic before it happens. So actually in this scheme, actually the provider have to predict the traffic, and according to the traffic the resources will be added or removed. Next is popularity driven. Popularity driven means in this method the internet searches for the popularity of certain application and create the instances. So popularity actually means for example, this scheme anticipate the increased traffic with the popularity. For example, if I have already explained, if some apps are going to take more popularity, like we have Python is going to be popular, so we have to install different Python app on the different virtual machines. Or if we have highly demand of Facebook app, so there are different apps. So actually they depend on the popularity of that app. If there is a high popular app, then we will going to deploy that application or resource onto that virtual machine. So resources may be wasted if traffic does not occur as expected. Actually this is based on the prediction. If that prediction is going to be as per live, so if prediction is okay, then resource allocation will be okay and it will be utilized, but it may be wasted if the prediction doesn't match with the live condition. So this is all about the resource provisioning methods.